What happens when an entire decade decides imagination should have no rules at all? The fantasy films of the 1980s proved that studios once greenlit ideas so bold, so unusual, and so visually wild that many would never make it past a modern planning meeting. These were worlds built with huge creature suits, practical tricks, and fearless creativity. And along the way, a few moments pushed boundaries in ways today's filmmaking would avoid entirely, for reasons you're about to see. Number 15. The Beastmaster, 1982. There is bold, and then there is Beastmaster. This movie opens with the kind of dramatic, mystical storytelling that feels pulled straight from an ancient legend, but filmed with the enthusiasm of a crew convinced anything was possible. At the center is Dar, a young hero with the rare ability to understand animals. Instead of relying on digital tricks, the production used real trained animals, which meant the team had to adapt constantly when an eagle decided to circle longer than expected, or the friendly ferrets wandered off during takes. Mark Singer, who played Dar, became so connected to the animals that he often stepped in to help handlers calm them, adding a genuine sense of friendship to the story. The world of Beastmaster is built from sweeping landscapes, sunlit mountains, deep valleys, and practical sets that feel handcrafted piece by piece. Everything looks slightly otherworldly, yet familiar enough to feel grounded. The mystical tone, the adventure themes, and the earnest sense of heroism all reflect the kind of sincerity that defined early fantasy cinema. It is a movie that takes its world seriously, even when the ideas feel wonderfully unusual. Today, a film this practical, this animal-focused, and this earnest would be seen as too risky for modern studios, but that is exactly what gives Beastmaster its charm. It is a window back to a time when imagination ran the show. Number 14. Conan the Barbarian, 1982. Conan the Barbarian helped shape the look and feel of fantasy cinema for years to come. It is grounded in wide, open landscapes, towering stone structures, and a musical score that carries the weight of a grand adventure. At the center is a young Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of his earliest breakthrough roles. His performance blends physical dedication with a surprising amount of emotional depth, portraying a character shaped by loss, but driven by inner strength. The crew filmed in rugged environments, often far from city comfort, relying on practical sets built from wood, stone, and handcrafted props. The weather itself became part of the production. Cold mornings, hot afternoons, and long days of climbing hills or crossing rocky ground added an authentic texture to each scene. The film's emphasis on physical endurance, natural terrain, and handcrafted world building gives it a feeling of real weight that you can sense in every frame. Modern fantasy. Films rely heavily on digital backdrops, but Conan's world was constructed with the raw materials of the real world. The production favored long shots of the open desert, real firelight, and large-scale sets instead of computer-generated environments. That commitment to physicality is rare today. Conan the Barbarian stands as a reminder of how powerful fantasy can feel when its world is built from the ground up with real materials, real effort, and real environments guiding every creative choice. Number 13. Clash of the Titans, 1981. Clash of the Titans is a perfect example of a fantasy adventure that balances epic storytelling with handcrafted artistry. The film draws directly from Greek mythology and brings its characters and creatures to life through stop-motion animation, a painstaking technique where models are moved one frame at a time. Ray Harryhausen, the legendary artist behind the creatures, spent months creating the movements of each scene, giving everything from winged horses to towering beings a unique charm and personality. The cast filmed against elaborate sets representing temples, islands, and mythical realms, each designed with detailed carvings and atmospheric lighting. The actors had to imagine creatures that were not yet there, performing with absolute seriousness in front of empty space or basic stand-ins. This created a style of performance that feels both theatrical and grounded, giving the movie its distinct tone. One of the most memorable elements is Medusa, animated with flickering torchlight and a suspenseful build-up that remains iconic. The combination of practical sets and animation creates a world that feels tangible, even when it ventures into the fantastic. Today's studios might hesitate to rely so heavily on stop-motion for major creatures, but this approach is exactly what gives Clash of the Titans its enduring identity. It is a timeless blend of craft, tradition, and imagination. Number 12. Krull, 1983. Krull is one of the most ambitious fantasy films of the 1980s, blending medieval adventure, cosmic imagination, and a heroic journey into a single story. The film introduces a world where shining castles, enchanted forests, and deep mountain caverns all coexist with mysterious cosmic elements. Instead of sticking to one genre, it boldly mixes themes, creating an adventure unlike anything else from its era. The production team built enormous sets, including the famous Black Fortress, a shifting structure filled with moving walls, glowing chambers, and intricate hallways. Practical techniques made these spaces feel alive. The lighting, the textures, and the carefully designed pathways created an atmosphere that was both eerie and grand. Actors had to navigate these sets carefully, often moving through tight spaces or dim corridors. The visual effects pushed boundaries as well. Krull features animated energy effects, large creature puppets, and the legendary glaive, a star-shaped mystical tool that became the film's signature symbol. Every effect was achieved through hands-on artistry, frame-by-frame planning, and intricate miniature work. In an era before digital shortcuts, number 11. The Ice Pirates, 1984. The Ice Pirates stands out for its cheerful mix of science fantasy, adventure, and comedy. The movie imagines a future where water has become extremely valuable, leading to daring crews who travel through outer space, searching for frozen reserves. Instead of taking itself seriously, the film leans into humor, colorful characters, and a playful tone that gives it a personality unlike other fantasy films of the decade. The production used bright, imaginative sets filled with metallic corridors, control panels, and handmade robotics. Many of the props were crafted from reused materials, giving the film a unique charm that modern digital design would never replicate. The cast embraced the fun of the story, improvising lines and adding personality to scenes that might have felt simple on paper. Their lively energy is a major part of what makes the film memorable. The practical effects team created everything from quirky robot companions to large, futuristic interiors, often experimenting with ideas on the spot. Unexpected moments, such as malfunctioning props or unplanned comedic timing, were often kept in the final cut because they added to the movie's playful identity. Today's big-budget films usually follow strict guidelines and consistent tones, but The Ice Pirates proudly does the opposite. Its cheerful blend of adventure and comedy is exactly the kind of creative risk the 1980s encouraged, and it remains a testament to that fearless spirit. Number 10. The Dark Crystal, 1982. The Dark Crystal is one of the most extraordinary fantasy achievements of the 1980s, built entirely without human actors on screen. Jim Henson and Frank Oz created an entire world populated by handcrafted creatures, each operated through complex puppetry that required teams of performers working in perfect sync. The film takes place in a land filled with crystal towers, wide fields, ancient ruins, and unusual life forms designed with incredible detail and imagination. What makes The Dark Crystal unforgettable is its commitment to practical artistry. The Skeksis, Mystics, Gelflings, and every creature in between were made from foam, fabric, and intricate mechanisms. Performers stood in underground pits, wore full-body suits, or operated multiple levers just to bring a single character to life. Every blink, tilt of the head, or movement of a hand had to be coordinated with absolute precision. That dedication created expressions and mannerisms that still feel astonishing today. The environments were just as detailed. Forests were built from giant sculpted roots and glowing mushrooms. Caverns shimmered under carefully placed lights. Nothing was digital. Everything you see physically existed on the stage. Modern studios would rarely take on a project requiring this much manual craftsmanship, especially on such a large scale. The Dark Crystal stands as a rare masterpiece where imagination was built by hand, and that handcrafted world continues to inspire new generations who discover its magic for the first time. Number 9. Legend, 1985. Legend is a dream brought to life, directed by Ridley Scott at the height of his visual creativity. The film is set in a glowing world where forests shimmer with floating pollen, sunlight streams through mist, and every corner feels touched by enchantment. Tom Cruise plays Jack, a young adventurer who must rescue a friend and restore harmony to a world threatened by darkness. But it is the film's atmosphere that truly sets it apart. To achieve its magical look, the crew built an enormous indoor forest set at Pinewood Studios. Trees soared toward the ceiling, water streams cut across the ground, and real plants were combined with artificial ones to create a living environment. Thousands of tiny white particles were released into the air during filming to create a soft, sparkling effect that makes every frame look like a painting. Tim Curry's transformation into a towering red figure of mystery and shadow required extensive makeup work, including full facial prosthetics and horns attached with great care. The result became one of the most iconic fantasy designs in cinema history. While the story itself explores friendship, courage, and balance, it is the film's visual bravery that stands out. Today's filmmakers might hesitate to create a practical set this large or commit so fully to lighting, mist, and handcrafted detail. Legend remains a visual poem, a film that feels like stepping into a dream you never want to leave. Number 8. Return to Oz, 1985. Return to Oz is one of the boldest family-aimed fantasy films ever released, not because of its story alone, but because of how sincerely it portrays the strange and mysterious corners of the Land of Oz. Instead of repeating the bright style of the earlier classic, this version explores forgotten realms, ancient magic, and unusual guardians who protect Oz from imbalance. The result is a film that feels both enchanting and incredibly unique. The movie follows young Dorothy as she discovers that Oz has changed. The Emerald City is quiet, her old friends are missing, and new figures appear in their place. The filmmakers built detailed practical sets for each location, from the crumbling city streets to the polished halls of the Gnome King's domain. Every doorway, brick, and ornament was constructed by hand, creating a world that feels lived in rather than glossy or simple. The film's creatures were brought to life through animatronics and creative puppetry. Characters like Tick-Tock required operators inside the suit, moving gears and joints with careful timing. The Wheelers moved with a combination of skating skill and theatrical choreography, gliding across the set in a way that felt playful yet mysterious. Return to Oz stands out because it treats its fantasy world with gravity and respect, never softening the strange or the unexpected. It is a reminder that fantasy can be imaginative and thoughtful at the same time. Number 7. Ladyhawke, 1985. Ladyhawke blends romance, adventure, and mysticism into a story that feels both intimate and sweeping. Set in a medieval landscape filled with stone towers, rolling fields, and thick forests, the film follows two cursed lovers who can never be together in human form at the same time. One transforms into a hawk by day, while the other becomes a wolf by night. It is a poetic idea brought to life with sincerity and emotional depth. The filmmakers relied on real European locations to give the story a natural sense of history. Castles, old bridges, and mountain ranges were used exactly as they stood, allowing the characters to move through spaces with centuries of atmosphere already built in. The animal transformations were represented with practical effects, trained creatures, and clever camera work rather than digital illusions. Matthew Broderick's character serves as both narrator and comic relief, adding warmth to a story filled with longing and hope. One of the most memorable creative choices is the soundtrack, which mixes orchestral music with modern electronic rhythms. It is a combination that surprised audiences at the time and still makes the film stand out today. It remains a gentle but powerful fantasy that leaves a lasting impression. Number 6. Willow, 1988. Willow is a shining example of fantasy world-building done with passion and craftsmanship. Directed by Ron Howard and produced with the creative involvement of George Lucas, the film introduces a world filled with enchanted forests, towering fortresses, and characters guided by hope and courage. Warwick Davis plays Willow, a kind-hearted farmer who finds himself on a journey much bigger than anything he imagined. The movie used a mix of large outdoor sets and studio-built interiors, creating environments that feel both grounded and magical. From misty cliffs to lush villages, every location feels thoughtfully constructed. The production also experimented with early digital effects, including the famous morphing sequence that was groundbreaking at the time. Combining these new technologies with practical creature suits gave the film a hybrid style that feels distinctively 80s. The cast spent much of their time outdoors, working through cold, heat, rain, and uneven terrain. This added realism to every scene, giving characters a sense of genuine effort as they traveled. Val Kilmer brought humor and energy to his role, balancing the film's emotional core with lively performances. Today's fantasy films often rely heavily on digital landscapes, but Willow carried its world on the strengths of its sets, costumes, and performers. Number 5. Deathstalker, 1983. Deathstalker is pure 80s fantasy energy distilled into one adventurous journey. It takes place in a rugged land where champions, travelers, and mysterious figures cross paths in a world filled with enchanted objects and challenging quests. While many films of the decade balanced light-hearted storytelling with dramatic moments, Deathstalker embraced a free-spirited approach, delivering a fast-paced adventure packed with imaginative settings and enthusiastic performances. The movie was filmed in outdoor locations with rough terrain, giving the characters a constant sense of motion and momentum. Costumes were handmade, props were crafted on short schedules, and the cast worked long days in sunlit fields and thick forests. This raw style created an immediacy that modern films rarely aim for. Every scene feels like a group of storytellers shaping a world with the tools they had and the creativity they brought. Practical stunts were performed with great effort, using careful coordination and rehearsed movements to bring excitement to each encounter. Directors and actors often collaborated on the spot to find the most interesting way to frame a moment or highlight a character's decision. Today's productions rely on layers of planning and digital shaping, but Deathstalker worked with spontaneity. Number 3. The Neverending Story, 1984. The Neverending Story remains one of the most iconic fantasy films ever made, thanks to its emotional depth, imaginative visuals, and unforgettable characters. The story follows Bastian, a young boy who discovers a magical book that transports him into the world of Fantasia. There, he witnesses the adventures of Atreyu, a brave young hero tasked with saving the land from a mysterious force. Filmmakers constructed enormous practical sets to create Fantasia. The Swamp of Sadness, Ivory Tower, and the sprawling fields were all physically built, allowing actors to interact with real environments instead of digital backdrops. Creature designs were just as ambitious. Falkor, the luck dragon, was brought to life through animatronics and giant puppetry. Operators worked behind the scenes to move his head, eyes, and tail with expressive detail. The film balances sadness, wonder, bravery, and hope in a way that feels deeply human. The use of real sets and puppetry gives every scene a sense of warmth and texture that modern films often miss. The Neverending Story represents the heart of 80s fantasy: practical artistry, sincere storytelling, and a willingness to. Number 2. Fire and Ice, 1983. Fire and Ice is a rare animated fantasy film created through rotoscoping, a technique where animators draw over live-action footage, frame by frame. This gives the characters a realistic sense of movement while maintaining the stylized look of painted backgrounds. Directed by Ralph Bakshi with artwork inspired by legendary illustrator Frank Frazetta, the movie blends vivid landscapes with dramatic animation in a way that feels wholly unique. The artists worked with actors who performed scenes on minimalist sets, capturing every gesture and step. Then, using thousands of hand-drawn frames, they transformed those movements into animated sequences filled with sweeping mountains, icy plains, and fiery fortresses. The background artists painted each environment with deep shadows and bold colors, creating a sense of scale that feels larger than life. Because everything was hand-created, the production required intense dedication. Animators spent countless hours refining motion, adjusting lighting, and matching colors to maintain the film's stylized world. The result is a movie that looks like a moving painting, with characters who flow through the environment with a natural rhythm. Today's filmmakers rely heavily on digital animation, but Fire and Ice stands as a tribute to how powerful traditional techniques can be when paired with imagination and skill. Number 1. Red Sonja, 1985. Red Sonja represents the adventurous spirit of 80s fantasy cinema. Inspired by classic comic book tales, the film follows a determined young warrior who sets out to protect her world from chaos. Brigitte Nielsen stars as Sonja, bringing a confident, fiery presence to the character. Alongside her is Arnold Schwarzenegger, adding charisma and strength to the journey. The filmmakers built large sets to capture the grandeur of Sonja's world. Stone temples, towering gates, and sprawling outdoor landscapes help create a sense of epic scale. The cast trained for physical scenes that required swordplay, horseback riding, and coordinated movements. Their work gives each moment a sense of energy and authenticity. Costumes were handcrafted with vibrant colors and bold shapes, matching the fantastical tone of the story. Cinematographers used bright sunlight, sweeping camera movements, and dramatic shadows to enhance the adventure. The film's dedication to real locations and handmade sets gives it a rich texture that modern productions, with their heavy use of digital effects, rarely replicate. Red Sonja is a shining example of the bold storytelling and practical creativity that made 80s fantasy unforgettable. It is the kind of imaginative adventure that feels rare today. The 80s proved that fantasy could be fearless, handmade, and wildly imaginative. These films weren't polished by modern rules. They were powered by creativity, daring choices, and worlds built from pure vision. Which one surprised you most? Share your thoughts, hit subscribe, and keep exploring with us. There are still countless forgotten treasures waiting for their moment to shine again.